What is the ego? Because you've probably heard about it in many different contexts, maybe different traditions or spiritual beliefs. Maybe you think of it as some part of the psyche or your identity or who you are, which it's all related and yeah, it's all correct. But most of us don't really understand the depth of the ego and what it means, not just from a spiritual perspective, but what it actually is. Not just as some vague metaphor or analogy of you have a big ego, it means you have this sense of self-importance or arrogance and you feel like you are the center of the world. So if you don't know what the ego does or how it's actually acting as this blockage, then it puts you at a disadvantage when you are trying to grow as a person, because it can sort of keep you stuck in this loop. And it has a very strong grip as well. And ultimately, the ego just leads to much more suffering than is necessary. Because when your ego is inflated or it has a tight grip, however you want to put it, then you're focused more on yourself. You feel more individualistic. You have a stronger sense of self-importance, of identity. And at the end of the day, this isn't a good thing because that causes more attachment as well. More attachment to possessions, to yourself, to different things. And attachment causes pain. The more we are attached to things, the more pain we experience. It's okay to have some attachment. We all have some attachment. After all, we live in this 3D framework where we need some attachment. You want to have a house, you want to have a car, you want to have family, you want to have all these different things that you associate with you. But when we become over-attached to anything, this is when it creates a problem because we start suffering. Not necessarily because we have those things, but because we are always at fear of losing those things. But if you don't have that sense of attachment, if you aren't tied to all of these different material things in your life, then at the same time, you have nothing to lose. You're lighter. You can experience these deeper states of gratitude, of compassion, of connectivity, because you don't have all of this attachment and this stuff weighing you down. So, literally speaking, the ego is a mechanism. It's not some sort of abstract thing or even a part of your psyche, but it is what makes you you in the literal sense. So put it this way, if you didn't have an ego, then you wouldn't have a sense of me. There would be no operator in this body who has your thoughts, who has your memories, your narrative, your attitudes, your behaviors, and everything that creates this concept of I, of me, this story. That would not exist. So if you did not have an ego, you would be a vegetable. And as delicious as that sounds, it makes life very difficult because you wouldn't be able to do anything. Imagine that you have a frame, and normally we're this little blob on this frame. That's what our lives are. We know that there's a lot happening outside of us. We know there's a lot of other people and life goes on and blah, blah, blah. But of course, we're the ones running our own lives and we can only experience reality through our own personal perspective, at least while in these bodies, through our mind. But if you have a strong ego, then that frame starts shrinking. And more attention, more awareness comes into the self, protruding your sense of self or your identity or this me, until the whole universe is just you, quite literally, because you don't acknowledge or realize that anything exists outside of you. In saying that, if you have an inflated ego or if you have a big ego, then you have this stronger sense of self-importance. Your perception is more zoomed in on your own life and you have these blinders on. You can't see the rest of the world. You can't see history. You know, you might see pictures, you might see people going through different problems, but it's not in your reality. It doesn't matter to you. But when you have a smaller ego, or your ego doesn't have such a tight grip, then it's sort of the opposite. So that frame that you are in becomes bigger and bigger. From being a little blob on this frame, you become this tiny little dot. And even though you are seeing through these eyes, you are listening through these ears, you are speaking through this tongue, your sense of self isn't as prominent as someone with a bigger ego, because there's less of a barrier between you and what we could call the divine, or the spiritual worlds, or ultimate reality. You perceive yourself as a smaller part of a bigger collective in every sense, because there isn't this ego drilling down and forcing you to be the point of awareness, the center of attention. So what happens in your reality if you have a smaller ego is that you stop thinking about I so much. Your concept of I begins to deteriorate. And even though you recognize yourself, of course, even though you have stuff, you have a story, a narrative, your perception is more tuned into the collective, into the world, and you see yourself as just a small part of a much, much bigger system where you don't have so much self-importance. You see it more realistically. I'm just this little baby ant in this big, big world, and my life will come and go very quickly until there's no memory of me left whatsoever. It's more of having that perspective, of seeing that life is just this river of motion, and your consciousness, your experience is just one tiny little blip in that. So the ego really is a mechanism. It's the plug of reality. Because if you were to take out that plug, then you would not have an individual awareness. You would experience a deeper collective awareness that we understand as Brahman, as God, as Source, as a universal consciousness. Because every tradition has a different word for it, they have different concepts for it, but they all agree that the ego is that barrier between you and God, or what you consider to be God, or these higher realms of consciousness that we can experience. And it's a necessary thing as well, because we need an ego to be here. And we all have an ego, it's not a bad thing. And the ego manifests in all of these different ways. Not just through attachment, through I am a doctor, I am this person, I had these parents, I lived in this house, I came from poverty, I did this, I did that. Not just through attachment, but also through recognition of the self. Because your ego thrives on being a recognized, separate consciousness, being an individual. So whenever you receive praise or a compliment or reinforcement, or someone acknowledges you, you feel good because it's sort of like rubbing the ego a little bit. The ego is saying, hey, you are validating my existence, which is great because my whole job is to exist. So I'm going to feel good and keep growing bigger. And it really runs every part of our life. It's the reason why I want to make a good video. Why I'm sitting here and I care about how I look, because I might be judged. Because people might think I'm an idiot. It's the reason why we build the lives that we do, because we want to be recognized, we want to be seen in a positive light by other people. And again, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, because we should strive to, do positive things in our lives. We should strive to have an image that reflects who we really are. And to make our lives whatever we can make them. We have a lot of potential. But the ego becomes a problem when it starts inflating. Because there is this balance of where we could say like the ideal level of the ego, or the optimal level of the ego, is where it doesn't control you, it doesn't control your life, It's not so concerned with the self or with what you do or who you are. You can, not take yourself so seriously, and you don't really care what people think about you and all that, which is, again, easier said than done. But at the same time, it gives us that drive, that sense of awareness, that sense of, hey, I'm an individual and I want to make my life count. So there really is an optimal balance of what we are trying to achieve to live the happiest, most fulfilling lives that we can live. Because once the ego starts bloating and it gets too big, that's when it starts cutting into our sense of fulfillment. Because we are identifying with a lot. We have a lot to lose. We are so concerned with this sense of me that we miss the bigger picture. Because I think real fulfillment, real happiness is not about the sense of me. It's about connecting to something bigger than ourselves. And allowing ourselves to, worship and to love and to be of service and to help. And to use your life, use your individual life in a way that can provide to the collective, that can actually help and be of service to something. And a lot of people do this quite naturally as well. For example, I'd say most parents are at service to their kids. When they have kids, it's a massive blow to the ego. Because suddenly their life isn't about them anymore. It's about their kids. So it's humbling. It puts life into perspective and makes you realize that, if happiness is not just me and what I accomplish for my life, then I don't need to do all of these things to be happy. I can just be happy. So it's almost like you don't have that pressure on you. It's taking off that weight from yourself and putting it away somewhere, where you can actually breathe a little bit and realize that, it's like you're not being crushed under the pressure of the world. And, I think that same reason is why a lot of people have anxiety or depression or a lot of these issues or self-worth issues, because it comes from an inflated ego. Again, not a bad thing, not saying they're aggressive people or they're necessarily egocentric people, but because they're too focused on themselves. And you'll see in many different religions and many different beliefs and traditions that the focus is on loosening the grip of the ego, because that is what we tend to associate with fulfillment, with this connection to God. Because if we start weakening the grip of the ego, then our awareness begins to expand. We begin to perceive ourselves smaller and smaller and smaller until we realize that we're just part of this system and we feel more connected to it. This is why people put their love in God or Jesus or the Buddha, or they worship different gods or different things. The point is they are putting their focus and their energy and attention onto something that's bigger than them, which is good. This is why a lot of these people say, I was miserable until I met God, or until I developed a relationship with God. Because it's not necessarily God, but more that they've loosened the grip of the ego and now they're putting their energy on a higher force, on a higher power, so it takes this burden off them. And suddenly they feel lighter, they feel like they can breathe again, and they appreciate it. It creates room for all of these high vibrational emotions like gratitude and love and compassion to start raising up. And these are what make you feel good. These are what make you feel genuinely fulfilled in your life. But when you have the ego, it sort of blocks all of that. It blocks our ability to provide and send energy out. Because we're concerned for ourselves. We're concerned about what people think of me, if I'm being validated, if I'm being approved of. What is my life looking like? This is why it creates this burden and we get smothered in our own egos, which is crazy. But what can you actually do about it? So it's important to understand that the ego is always in a state of flux. It's not really this fixed, consolidated thing. We might have different like baselines of where it is, sort of like your resting heart rate. This is where your ego usually is, around this area. But it shifts throughout your life experience depending on what you are going through or what happens. So let's say you set off on some business venture and you end up being very successful and patting yourself on the back, and everyone cheers you on, and you feel great about it. You feel like you have this sense of achievement. You did it. You finally did it. But the ego is starting to grow and tighten its grip because you are identifying more with what you have done, or with this sense of me, because that is reinforcing the sense of self. It's saying, I am this successful business person or entrepreneur, or I did this, I did that, this is my property, this is my identity. So just like that, the ego starts growing throughout our lives and throughout the labels that we attach with. I'm a doctor, I'm an adventurer, I'm a traveler. I realized that in my own life, my ego grew a lot when I started identifying as a traveler, or when I started identifying with my spiritual beliefs more, and I'm interested in shamanic traditions, I'm interested in this, I've done all these things, I'm so interested. So that's just, my ego inflating because I'm attaching onto things. It's sort of like hooking itself in with its little claws and saying, this is me, this is I'm starting to figure it out now, this is what I am, this is how I grow. Through reinforcing that sense of self or identity in whichever way it is. And also, our ego shrinks sometimes. So often this is when life gives you a lesson of humility. So I noticed this in my life a lot actually, is that whenever something's going well, whether it's like my website's performing well, or I know I'm doing something cool in my life, I like talking about it. I like, I mention it when I'm having conversations with people, and I feel good about that. I feel like, like I'm actually, I'm impressive. I'm doing something cool. People look up to me. But what happens most of the time is when I start getting a head full, or when I start getting into this frame, life will give me a kick up the arse and something will go wrong and everything will fall apart. And I'll be back at ground zero, sort of picking up the pieces again and saying, wow, that sucked. But a lesson in humility, holy crap. Because it really works. Certain situations in life, when they kick us down, they make us so humble. Like they really make us reconnect with, I did get a big head full. I completely lost touch with who I actually am, with what matters to me. With, just having food on the table, with having companionship. Because when we get a head full, that's when we start like becoming more superficial. Because we're identifying with all of this crap. We're identifying with an image rather than, things that are actually important. Rather than with fulfillment, with happiness. That takes the back seat and the image takes the front seat. So throughout life, your ego is constantly growing and sometimes deflating a little bit and growing a little bit and deflating. But generally it's sort of like in the middle somewhere. And to be honest, that's where you want it, because when it's in the middle, that's when you're the most balanced in your life, that you have this you have a prominent sense of self, and you have, ambition and desire, and you want to do things, and you want to make this life count because it's yours, and blah blah blah, YOLO. But at the same time, you're not like overly concerned with it. You're not in your head when you're talking to people. You're not trying to prove yourself. You're not seeking that validation or that approval. Like, you don't really care about these things. Everything else is a bonus. It's more like, okay, you're still seeking just these You're still seeking happiness and fulfillment and things that actually matter. You're going more inwards into your soul nature rather than staying on the surface of it. So, what I've realized is that most people are more on the end of having an inflated ego. And if you're on a spiritual path, you're looking to reduce the ego, to reduce that grip, to step more out of the image and more into authenticity. Because on one level or another that's how you feel connected, that's how you feel these deeper vibrations of joy and gratitude and love. It's not by reinforcing the self, it's by removing the self, removing the filter from our divine reality, from our divine nature. And that's really what spiritual growth is about. It's taking off all the layers of the self, the ego, taking away our behaviors and our patterns and our attitudes and everything that doesn't serve us, taking off all that baggage so that we can reconnect with these deeper states of consciousness that are always there. Just, again, there's a lot of crap on top of it. So, likely you're looking to reduce your ego because you find that that's the direction you want to go and that is what will bring more fulfillment to your life. So we're going to look at a few things you can do to actually do that. And before we go into this, it's important to realize that there's not like one act you can do to just like get rid of the ego, but it's really a lifetime practice. It's really treating this as part of your lifestyle, part of your behaviors, ingraining new patterns and ways of thinking that, reflect your higher self rather than your ego or your egoic self or your lower self. And building yourself in a way, setting a new foundation so that you can connect with these deeper states of joy, so that this ego isn't so much in the way. And the first thing you can do is first just have awareness of when you are stepping into your ego or when your ego is talking, because it's probably quite a lot. It probably happens every day and most of the time you don't even realize it. But what that means is when you start talking about yourself, when you start looking for ways to validate yourself or approve yourself, or when you're story topping, like a lot of this shines or comes through in our social interactions. So it's really important to just first keep in mind of your social interactions, what you're saying, why are you saying these things, and questioning it. So ask yourself, why am I looking for approval? Why am I inserting my story here? Why am I talking about myself when this person was talking about their self? Why can't I just put my attention onto this person and listen to them and let them talk about whatever they want without needing to, prove myself or without needing to feel like I need attention? So our ego pops up so regularly, and most of us don't even catch it when it does. But that is the first step of releasing the grip that the ego has on you, is just by being aware of when it comes out every day, in every interaction. Every time you are looking for some sort of self-validation, or you are seeking to feel good about yourself or feel important. So this happens all the time. But you really just need to drill in that habit of catching it. And it's not going to work every time, believe me. Like when you first start doing this, you'll catch your ego coming out a lot, and a lot of the time you won't stop it because you'll feel like it's too great of an opportunity to, reinforce your sense of self here. Or talk about yourself, or you just want to feel good because, maybe you haven't had many good conversations and you just want to talk about your own life, but you realize that's your ego coming out. And you won't always be in control of it. It will happen a lot that you talk because the ego's talking, or because you are trying to feel more, you're trying to reinforce your self-image, or you're trying to even put out its image of yourself, rather than just being this authentic, messy self that you are. stop identifying with this image of yourself so much and try and step more into authenticity, even when it's messy, even when it's strange, even when you feel awkward, even when you feel like an idiot. It doesn't matter. Like, who are you trying to impress? I'm not saying that you should just like let yourself go and be a slob or anything, but maybe that's a good question to ask yourself as well, is who are you trying to impress? And why are you trying to impress them? There's a lot of pressure to put on this mask and try to be this person, to try and present yourself as this successful person to the world, because especially if you feel like you aren't, you're just putting this incredible strain on yourself and tightening everything up. So you have no space. You have no space to reflect or to contemplate or to just enjoy, where you are and be present with the experience that you're having, because you're always trying to be someone. You have these expectations on yourself. You're putting this image out. You speak a certain way. You structure sentences a certain way. And some people become incredibly good at putting on this mask where they fool themselves and they believe that they are this person. And I get it, like fake it till you make it, right? But you can still push for the same things and work on the same projects and go for the same achievements without associating your sense of self with those things, without trying to be that person, without trying to present this image to the world. And I definitely do it myself as well. Often I'm presenting some sort of mask. I'm charismatic, I've got my shit together, I'm a spiritual teacher, my website's flourishing, I'm doing really well. And I try and present this image that, I want to be someone that others can look up to. I want to be a good role model. I want to be a good example. But at the same time, by identifying with that image rather than just being yourself and being 100% realistic with who you are, why am I this constant needy person who has these self-worth issues? Why am I always looking for validation from other people? What is actually going wrong in here? This is where you can actually get to the roots of your problem. It's not when you are playing this image of how can I be someone or how can I be this successful person, but rather it's about stepping more into that messiness and that sense of authenticity. And sticking with it, just being yourself even when it feels uncomfortable, because you will be challenged sometimes. Sometimes you won't want to be your authentic self because it feels vulnerable. And it's really just a practice of, just saying, again, being aware of it and saying, no, this is a bit out of alignment with who I am or what I like or how I have conversations. I'm just doing this because I'm trying to impress these people, or I'm trying not to hurt someone here, or I'm trying to do this or that. Really, it's just about noticing when you are out of alignment. So you have these two separate things. You have, this is who really feels good to me, who I am underneath, what is authentic, what is intuitive. And this is the mask. This is who I'm presenting myself. This is my persona. This is who I want to become. So just noticing when these are out of alignment, and you notice that this image you're putting out isn't necessarily congruent with how you're actually feeling. If you're faking smile, if you're trying to cover something up, like an emotion, a thought, or something, instead of just being honest with yourself and being honest with the people you're around, and just, sometimes admitting defeat and allowing yourself to feel like an idiot, allowing yourself to feel awkward or whatever, instead of just being someone that you're not. That's also when you start moving the needle with your ego, because the ego starts responding. You start putting out a more authentic image that, or let's say not an image at all, you're just really being yourself and seeing how that manifests in the world. And you can either take it or you can leave it, but that creates less things for the ego to hook onto. Because if you have a mask, if you have a persona, if you have an image of yourself, then that's just another layer of your identity. That's just another thing, more ammunition for the ego, which is what you don't want. If you're trying to reduce your ego, you need to starve it. You need to remove its ammunition. You need to recognize where it's getting ammunition from, how it's using it, how it's inflating itself. And the final thing I want to talk about here, which is possibly the most important, is humility. The last maybe year or so in particular, I've realized just how important humility is. And again, don't take me wrong, I am definitely not a humble person. You know, like I'm not a humble person. It's true. I still have an ego. I still have this sense of, you know, I need to be doing this. I need to be achieving more. I need to be showing the world an image of who I really am. But one thing I'm aiming towards more now is genuinely being more humble. Because humility is such an important thing for spiritual growth. And I think it's something that you need to set your eyes on, because it's done me a lot of good making that my focus and just realizing that, oh, you know, maybe in the past it used to be all the way down here. It used to be like a, you know, this is my 30th priority. It's somewhere down the bottom of the pile. Now it's one of my top priorities at the stage of life that I'm in, where I'm at in my own growth, because I realize that true humility is when you have no desire to prove yourself. And if you have some sort of self-worth issues, you will have some desire to prove yourself. It will be harder to be humble, because there is a direct connection there that, you know, if you're not humble, it's probably because you don't feel worthy in yourself. So you are trying to prove the world that you are worthy to make up for it. But people who are genuinely humble, in my experiences, they're often people who are in poverty. They're often people who don't have a whole lot. They don't have much to prove. They don't have anything to prove, but they've probably gotten to a point where they don't give a crap anymore. They opted out of this rat race long ago, and they decided to focus on what I have now. How can I extract all the happiness I can from this? Try very hard not to just put on an image of being humble. Your emotions need to reflect it, and if they're not reflecting it, you're going to spiritual bypass. You're going to start stepping over all this stuff that you really need to work through along your spiritual journey if you want to authentically get to these states. And just like not being that guy. Not being someone who has to prove to the world that they're humble. Because that's just like this little weird loop that you're in. And a lot of people, especially like spiritual people, really get stuck in that loop quite a lot, because they're more concerned with the image of what they're putting out. Their ego changes form. It becomes a spiritual ego. It's putting on a disguise and saying, okay, now my clothes have changed because I'm no longer seeking status or wealth or fame. Now I'm seeking enlightenment, and I'm more enlightened than everyone else. And I have experienced ego death 25 times, and I have been to 25 ayahuasca ceremonies. So you don't want to be that guy who's putting out an image of how humble you are and how much you've learned, or that you're the greatest teacher or whatever, because it's not actually helping you in the long run. What you need to do is genuinely start working on being more of a humble person. Needing to prove yourself less, addressing that core wound that is driving that desire to prove yourself. Because if you can do that, then you will start not caring about your self-image as much, because you realize that it has no importance to your life and to your sense of happiness and to these feelings of gratitude and compassion and these, you know, what you're actually trying to achieve here in life, which probably isn't clout. Like, you don't need clout. It's just going to make your journey longer. If you like this content, stay tuned, because I will keep making more of it. So thank you very much. Take care of yourself, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you later.